When earlier this week, President Donald Trump announced that he would be rescinding the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or the DACA program, the discussion of what exactly would happen to nearly 800,000 young people dominated the news in the U.S. Here in Massachusetts, there are roughly 23,000 DACA-eligible residents. And in the city of Boston, teachers have been among the most vocal public allies and supporters of DACA students. Through the Boston Teachers Union, educators have joined together to protect immigrant and refugee children. To give us more details on their position, we've invited Jessica Tang. She is the president of the Boston Teachers Union. So, first of all, buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
You know a little bit of Spanish, right?
Sí.
Un poquito, right?
Sí.
But let's take it through. Before we even get in, believe it or not, there are still some people who don't understand the whole DACA thing. Who are these 800,000 children who are now in danger of being deported?
Sure. So these are mostly young people who came with their parents to this country when they're babies, when they're 2, 3, 4, and have grown up in the United States their whole lives. Many of these students, in fact, didn't even know that they were undocumented until they were applying for college. And then they realized that they weren't able to be eligible for in-state tuition or other forms of financial aid because they're undocumented.
And many of these are Boston public school students.
Sure, former and current, and I would say even some of our teachers.
Really?
are DACA recipients. And so, again, these are Americans, you know, young people who came here, have known the United States their whole life. They're teachers, they're medics, they're doctors, they're people who we interact with every day.
Yeah, and you know, one of the points is, and I was talking to one of them the other day, is the people who don't understand is, she was Mexican. Now, she's been here since she was very young. She doesn't even speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's common because, again, I mean, I grew up in the United States and I speak a little Spanish, I speak a little Chinese because my family is, you know, immigrating from China. But I couldn't possibly imagine just uprooting all of a sudden or living in fear every day that I could be deported to a place that I've never known or never grown up in. And that's the fear that a lot of these young people are living with every single day.
Yeah, because you're on the front lines, right? You're dealing with these young people on a daily basis in school. Tell me a little bit about what you found some of these kids are going through.
Sure. So, I mean, this is, again, not new for a lot of our undocumented young people. I was reading, actually, one of my very good friends who's a fellow activist and undocumented activist who helped to fight for DACA, actually, talked about how when he was younger, if his mom came home late from school one night, he just started crying because he was afraid that she had been deported. And he was like, that's just what happened. And so a lot of our younger students are afraid that when they go to school and they come home, their parents aren't going to be there. And this is not something that's like an idea or something that could happen. Over the past weekend, we had some Boston Public School students who were actually detained in New Hampshire, for example. And then for our older students, for our high school students, a lot of them lose hope. And not only are they living in fear, but they're losing hope of, you know, why do I even bother going to school if I can't go to college? Or what's going to happen to me, you know, if I do graduate? And really have a lot of anxiety about their futures. And so this is why it's been so important to us to take a very firm stand and make sure that our students and our families and our colleagues and our members know that we stand with them and will continue to fight next to them. And we've been doing so for many years and will continue to do so.
What does that entail, you guys supporting them, and how do you do that?
Sure. So we actually, for several years now, have had an immigrant rights committee actually at the Boston Teachers Union where we work closely with the student immigrant movement. And over the last few years, we've been working with SIM and supporting their work, making sure that our teachers know what DACA even is, even before any of this happened, making sure students know that they can apply for DACA. More recently, it's taken the form of many different levels. So at our school level, you know, even after the election in November, we knew a lot of our families were scared and our students were scared. And so we planned stand-ins, so they're kind of like walk-ins, where we hold signs before school that said everyone is welcome here. So we had them in Spanish, we had them in actually 7 different languages, just to remind families and let them know that doesn't matter what their immigration status is, we care about them. We want our schools to be safe and welcoming places. They should not be afraid to come into the schools, and we will do what we can to defend and protect our students and families.
What kind of effect do you think this has long-term on some of these students? I mean, you mentioned something very important, which is some of them didn't even know they were undocumented until they started to apply for federal grant, for even tuition, right, in-state tuition?
Right, that's right. And so again, you know, I think sometimes our country wants to other people, right? But again, these are our friends. These are people you might run into in the supermarket. They're, you know, serving you food. They're in our schools teaching. You know, these are Americans through and through. And, you know, to rescind DACA, it's been so upsetting to so many people because it's so against our values of diversity and celebrating the diversity that's made our country great. And we need to take action. And so we are calling on our members too to call their Congress people. You know, DACA was a short-term temporary stay. It was never a long-term solution. So, you know, this is the time where we have to take a stand now, and the legislature, Congress needs to pass the DREAM Act to have a permanent solution, not just a temporary solution.
Yeah, do you think, what do you think is going to happen in the next 6 months? I mean, do you think Congress can actually get their act together and pass it?
I mean, it's going to take democracy. And that's why I think it's so important. I want to be hopeful because this is such an important thing, and I understand the reality of our political world right now. And so I have to have hope, but my hope is in people calling their Congress people speaking up, and people who really maybe in the past have not felt obligated to become politically active, to realize that this is a time in our history where we cannot be on the sidelines. This is a clear moral issue, and we have to take a stand. We have to do everything in our power to get our Congress to do the right thing in this situation, and in the state to pass the Safe Communities Act.
Yeah, I feel this is one of those issues too that until you actually see somebody, you know, feel them, hear them, know about them, it doesn't hit home. I mean, you're on the front lines, like I said, the teachers. I think probably that's why you guys are so involved, because you're living the lives or the kind of the tumultuous lives these kids are having to deal with.
Absolutely, and that's why our teachers also recently came up with on their own initiative. We have an Unafraid Educators group, and we have a website actually with lots of resources for parents, students, and educators called unafraideducators.org.
What is it again?
Unafraideducators.org.
Unafraideducators.org.
That's right, and a lot of them work with high school students who are undocumented students, and so they created an Unafraid scholarship. And we partnered with Mira to actually raise, I think it was over $25,000 at the end, to give out scholarships to BPS high school students who are undocumented so that they can pursue their dream of going to college. And so those are some of the concrete actions our members are taking. But again, it's also the individual interactions we have every day with our families to ensure that our students that they are welcome, that we are doing everything we can to protect them, and that they deserve a quality public education, and we'll continue to fight with them and for them.
How many teachers in the union?
So we represent 10,000 teachers, and it's not just actually teachers. We also represent nurses, guidance counselors, social workers, related service providers, occupational therapists, so education professionals in Boston Public Schools.
And before we finish your journey to Boston, because you're not Bostonian, you weren't born in Boston, but you're Bostonian now. I know you are.
Yes, yeah. So Boston's home to me. I've lived here longer than any other place in my life, but my family moved from Taiwan, and I was born in Ohio, and then I lived in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and then my parents moved to Houston. So I came here for college, and I've stayed. I fell in love with the city, with the students, with the schools, and I've been here ever since. So
good, we need you
years.
here.
I'm glad to be here.
Good job. Thank you for coming by the way.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
We'll continue with this because this is an ongoing story, definitely.
Great.
Thank you, Jessica, and good luck. All right, when we come back, the details on a new local awards event that's happening in Boston in November. More information right here on Revista Hispana.